Just so everyone knows, we're also recording this, and hopefully we'll be able to put this up online at a later date. Carol, you okay? We're just waiting on Carol.
Write down my address.
She's writing down her address. That's okay. You let us know when you're done. Carol Tanton, everybody. She's a wonderful volunteer. Wonderful volunteer, yes. And a dear
May
friend.
not come home one day.
That's
She
on,
may be in a
it's on
pile
video.
in the yard, just so you know. Just so you know, because I know how to butcher chickens.
Oh, yes. Hello, everybody. Yes, right. Today's presentation is called An Afternoon with Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings, a conversation about the life, the friends, and the cookery of Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings, the Pulitzer Prize winning author of The Yearling. I have a clicker here. Our special guest today is Dr. Ashley Reese. Dr. Ashley Reese received her PhD in children's literature from the University of Cambridge. She researches girls' literature, including how place impacts the heroine's identity. She wrote The Rise of American Girls Literature, which was published in 2021 by the Cambridge University Press. Ashley is a trustee of the Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings Society. In this role, she seeks to promote Florida-based literature. She is also the director of the Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings Society website. Ashley's current project is for a forthcoming article examining the work of Diane Dillon, who's the co-illustrator of Rawlings' The Secret River, and that is a children's fantasy novel first published posthumously in 1955. Dr. Reese.
Thank you.
Next. We're still trying to figure out the technology here. So today's presentation is sponsored by the Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings Society. Yes, yes, I am pronouncing that correctly. Correct, right? Because she was Scottish, so growing up, I always pronounced it Kinnan, but it's Kinnan. So
now you all know. You can go and correct people. Everyone loves that when you correct them. So now you can go do that.
So the society is dedicated to honoring the life and works of the novelist. But I want to say that the idea for this presentation started with a conversation with Claire Koshar. This was her idea and her mission. Claire couldn't be here today, but we are recording this for her also. So she's with us in spirit. Next.
Yes. And this is also part of the Philip S. May Memorial. We have these conversations in honor of Philip S. May. So he was the son. We're going to talk a little bit about Marjorie's trial as a part of Cross Creek. And her lawyer for that was Philip S. May Sr., and his son, Philip S. May Jr., was instrumental in the founding of the society and was in fact the first president of the society. So these talks are obviously in honor of Marjorie, but they're also in honor of him and the way that he kept her spirit alive, and we're continuing to do so today.
Next. We have here a picture of the original barn.
Yeah, so this is a bit to honor our friend Claire, who, as part of the society, she herself has done so much to honor Marjorie. And when she first joined, she goes to the farm, and there's the house that is still there, but it wasn't really a farm because it didn't have the barn. And so, in large part, thanks to Claire's efforts, she made this barn happen and worked with the people who had known the original barn to reconstruct it in a way that looks like it never left, except with a little bit of steel so it doesn't fall down on us during hurricanes.
Just a little bit. And I just want to point out where Cross Creek is. Does everyone know where Cross Creek is? Okay, it's in the middle of nowhere. I know. But Cross Creek lies between the Lockaloosa Lake and Orange Lake. It is below Gainesville, as you can see from the map. I know it's very difficult, but the reason why I want to use a map is just so people know where this is. It is rather out of the way. Is that okay, Carol, to say that?
Yeah,
It is rather out of the way.
Yeah, okay.
But that's what also makes Cross Creek interesting.
So special.
It is.
So very special.
So for our conversation today, we're going to discuss 4 things, or 4 aspects. Her life, her friends, the community of Cross Creek, and then the cookery. We have a picture right here. This is Marjorie on her screened-in front porch. She didn't just pose. This is where she did a lot of her writing because it was so hot. You got to remember there's no air conditioning. If you ever go to the farm, you ever go to the porch, it is quite breezy, even in the heat. There is wind coming through, so it is a little bit of a respite being out in the porch than inside, especially if she's working all day. We're going to start with her life.
All right, so what I really admire about Marjorie is that she, in the 1930s and 40s, was living an unconventional life for a woman of that time. So here she is posed with her second husband, Norton Baskin, and she came to Florida in part with her first husband. So she and Charlie Rawlings were like, you know what we're gonna do? We're gonna go to Florida and live on an orange grove, and it's gonna take care of itself, and we're gonna write all day. And if you have done any sort of living off the land, or even just having a backyard garden, you learn pretty quickly. That doesn't happen. It does not grow itself. And so it ended up, we'll talk, I think, a little bit about it later, but he eventually does not stay, and she's on this orange grove by herself for quite a while. And then eventually she meets Norton and they get married, but he's not moving into the farm with her because he runs hotels. And so he frequently is staying at his hotel, or they had a suite at a hotel for a while, and she tried to live there, and she eventually was like, you know what, I'm gonna be at the beach house. They had a beach house up at near out St. Augustine, and we're gonna stay there. And he would stay, and then he would commute, or he would commute from the farm. And she was like, yeah, I'm gonna do this. And so they had this unconventional marriage where he was supporting her and supported her writing, but she was doing her own thing in a way that I think is not something we usually consider happening in the 1930s and 40s.
Did you want to go into World War II?
Oh yeah, and so, and then soon after they got married, World War II breaks out, and Norton decides, I'm gonna volunteer for the ambulance corps, and he ends up in the India-Burma theater, and that was really distressing to Marjorie. So I think her writing slows down a lot during that time because she's so worried about him. So I think it speaks to a great affection between them, right? Yes, it was an unconventional marriage, but that doesn't mean it was a marriage without love.
Okay, so we're going to be showing pictures, but we're also going to have some quotes, and I'm going to read the quotes. I understand the quote is behind me, but I'm going to read it out, and then we're going to discuss those quotes, sometimes in context, sometimes not in context. You'll understand what I mean. So here's a quote from Cross Creek. All life is a balance when it is not a battle between the forces of creation and the forces of destruction, between love and hate, between life and death. Perhaps it is impossible ever to say where one ends and the other begins, for even creation and destruction are relative. So what's interesting about Marjorie is that she was a northerner who wrote so eloquently of the South. She was an independent woman, but she was very reliant on her friends in Cross Creek, not only for the support of the farm, but for her writing. And she was a cracker apologist, but she also had 3 houses. She was quite wealthy. Not at first, though. It does build up. And then, which is also interesting and sometimes disturbing, is she was an ally of folks like Zora Neale Hurston. But she definitely used unquestionably problematic language in her books. And that's one of the things that we try and rectify today. But that's why it's so interesting.
Yeah, so a little bit about Marjorie, if you aren't familiar. She was born in 1896 up in DC. Her father had a farm in Maryland, and this is where she kind of learns about, to an extent, farm work. We'll talk a little bit about, she gets to, at times, live the life of being on a farm without having to do the labor of being on a farm. Isn't that wonderful? May we all have that experience. As she goes to the University of Wisconsin in 1914, and she's always a writer. So even as a child, she's getting things published in Washington Post, and McCall's, and then later after she graduates, she's working for newspapers. But it's not really until she comes down to Cross Creek that her short stories start taking off. Her work, I guess, finds its way to Max Perkins, who's the editor at Scribner's, and he's the one who really nurtures her writing. It's under him that South Moon Under comes out. He's the one who says, hey, have you thought about writing a boys book? And she's like, no, I don't want to do that. And he's like, have you thought about writing a boys book? And wouldn't you know, that's where the Yearling comes from, which is, I imagine how many of you know her name. When I say, oh, I'm part of this society, people are kind of like, sure. And I'm like, the Yearling? And they're like, oh, yeah, I know that book. And so that's comes out of her relationship, really, with Max Perkins.
You want to say who else Max Perkins represented?
Oh, you've not heard of them. Hemingway, this guy, someone, Fitzgerald, Thomas Wolfe. So, he has these names that we think of as, American literary canon, and Marjorie is right there with them.
Okay, here's a picture of Marjorie on her farm, and the farm was very important to her. She came down in 1928, and this is how she was going to get her inspiration for her writing. As we said before, she starts dabbling. She has her short stories, Cracker Chidlings, and then Jacob's Ladder, which she gets from the inspiration from working on her farm. This is a cute picture. I like this because these are Marjorie's ducks. She didn't really have ducks before. She didn't know what to do with them, so she would just pen them up, keep them in a cage. And then one day she was kind of tired of it. She was tired of feeding them. And so she opens up the door and she goes, you are now all free. And guess what the ducks do? Nothing. Now these ducks are smart because they know it's hunting season. So they stay. And they'll follow the chickens around, they follow her around, and at night they go back and sleep. And she was like, gosh darn, I can't get rid of these ducks. But really, the ducks, the animals, everyone at Cross Creek that furnished the inspiration for her stories, including the ducks. And she loves her ducks. So I just thought that was a cute picture. But there are times when she is working the farm, feeding the animals. At first she didn't know how to do any of that, but slowly over time she learned how to run a farm, mostly because of her neighbors. Okay, that's a good one. All right, here's another quote from Cross Creek. The region was flat, the horizon limitless, and as I came out of the cool blue water, I expected to find myself surrounded by a ring of rattlers. There were only Ross and Will, opening the lunch basket. I could not eat. Ross never touches liquor, and it seemed to me that I would give my hope of salvation for a dram of whiskey. I love that.
So, Marjorie, what's a nice way of saying this?
She loved whiskey.
That's a good way of saying it, yes. Marjorie really loved whiskey. And, it's something that you could say became a problem in her life. One of the stories that I think is really interesting is that she was close friends with Julia Scribner, who's the daughter of the Scribners, right? And so they would write letters back and forth. Julia would come and stay. She was kind of the daughter that Marjorie wished she had in many ways. And so Julia had come and stayed with Marjorie, and she's writing her afterwards, and she said, I really need to write to you about this accident that you had. And everyone says that the donkey came out of nowhere and you hit him on accident, but you were drinking, Marjorie, and the donkey didn't come out of nowhere. It was you were drinking and you were driving, and that's what happened. And Marjorie writes her back and says, nope. Everyone agrees the donkey came out of nowhere. It was not alcohol induced. Like it just happened. Stay out of it, Julia. That kind of thing. And so I think it is one of these things that was part of her life, and affected her health. And they would be like, her doctors would say, you gotta stop, and she'd be like, yeah, it's fine.
It's okay. But if you read Cross Creek, there are a lot of times in the book where I would have been fit to be tied if I didn't have that drink of whiskey. She's like, I had to come in, my trees aren't done, I had a drink of whiskey. So for a woman of her time, she does mention whiskey a lot. She does talk about it quite a lot. And everyone knew that, but everyone knew because they liked to drink whiskey too. And they knew where to get whiskey, and when whiskey wasn't available, there was also moonshine. But Adela, who is her perfect mate, we're going to talk about Adela later on, she didn't drink, and she gives us some stories that tell a little bit more of the background. Marjorie was a chain smoker, and the constant companion was whiskey. She would have car accidents back then, and she was in the first of too many car accidents, as Adela says, which she just flipped the car. No one knows how this car flipped. It was an old Buick. People were driving by and they say, oh, okay, they wave, and then next thing they know is like, that car is on its hood. So we're going to talk more about it, but whiskey does play into her life, both her writing, and if you've read any of her stuff, there's a lot of moonshine in there because this is the era of moonshine. But it's also in reference or in relation to the law. Remember, the law is much different in the scrub because you need to live, subsistence, and so forth. But we'll get into that later. Let's see. Okay. Friends. We're going to talk about her friends, which were very important. This is a picture of Tom, JT, the little boy in the middle, also known as Jake, and Pearl Glisson. These were her neighbors. And Marjorie's, I say MK every once in a while, Marjorie's relationship was important in running the farm, but also important as they were characters in her books. And there's one story in which, everyone, when she comes down to the farm, they're a little suspicious of her. They think she's a Yankee. She's like, I'm not a Yankee, I'm from DC. I'm like, oh, you're a Yankee. But over time, she builds their confidence. And there's one episode in which she thought that Tom had poisoned her dog because he said, I'm not going to have any female dogs in the creek. And she was like, someone just poisoned my dog. Well, he meant he wasn't going to have any female dogs. He didn't mean there wasn't going to be any female dogs. But they didn't talk for about a year. And they would walk by, just walk by and look the other way. And they were neighbors. And there's not a lot of people in the creek, and you need your neighbors if something goes wrong. So one day, because Marjorie's very strong, she just went up to him and goes, what's going on? He's like, I don't know, you tell me. You poisoned my dog. He goes, no, I didn't. I tell you who did, someone who's jealous of our relationship. And that's really what it was. And they were able to smooth it out. And that's what was important about having friends in the creek, is that they were able to talk to each other. It's a small community. At book club, we talked about that, right, Carol? How these people learned about each other's families, their needs, and they would check in on each other. So if you had a fight, it was not a good thing, not only for each person, but for the community as a whole. We have another quote here. Oh, this is a good one. Sometimes there are friendships that have no apparent reason for existence. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Between people set apart by every circumstance of life, yet so firm in their foundations that they survive conditions that would separate friends of more apparent suitability. My friendship with Mo was one of these. Mo said and believed that we were friends because we needed each other. Now, Mo is an essential character in Cross Creek, but also a very important friend. He's in one of the funniest chapters, chapter 6, The Evolution of Comfort. If you read that, that's the time that Marjorie gets an indoor toilet. And Mo helped build that. He was a carpenter. But he's also in a sad chapter because living in the creek, here, that's a picture of Mo and his wife, wore him down. He died young, he died in his 50s, just because of malaria. They all had malaria. And just the work was so hard, he eventually I think he had a stroke and a heart attack and passed away. But, again, according to Adela, who is Marjorie's maid, she didn't have many friends. So there's two Marjories. She had a lot of visitors, but very few close friends. But she did like to
write.
To write.
Yeah, and that's one of the gifts that we have of Marjorie. So she has the books that she's written. She also was just a prolific correspondent, and so we have these collections of her letters back and forth from Julia, back and forth from her editor, Max Perkins, between she and Norton Baskin. And so we have these letters because she was devoted to that. And I mean, obviously nowadays we can pick up the phone or we can text and all these things, but they had their letters, and that's how, while she's not isolated because she had her community on the farm, but while she's in Florida, she's able to send these letters up to New York, up to, out to India, wherever Norton is.
She was a typist.
Yes, she was a typist, which to her credit means that her words are transcribed probably pretty accurately, versus if you're trying to read my chicken scratch. The future people won't know what I was saying. But Marjorie, we know because it was on a typewriter. And she also corresponded to soldiers. In fact, one of the Cross Creek Cookery, we don't have the quote, but Cross Creek Cookery opens with her, a soldier has written her saying, "We can't read Cross Creek because your descriptions of food are they make us wish we were eating better than we currently are." And so she felt this need that she should respond to them as they're reaching out to her because she's grateful for what they're doing. And so that became part of her correspondence.
And she was known for writing letters to soldiers, and she answered every single one. She would get up in the morning, have her breakfast, and then just sit on her porch every day typing out letters. And then when she was done typing out letters, then she'd go to writing. So that was her routine every morning. So she was great at correspondence. So we're going to move to the next one here. Here we go. Now we pass as though we were strangers. I am ashamed to face him, having used him in my loneliness, and then betrayed him. He showed no signs of recognition. His tail curves back over his back. He trots with a high head, looking straight ahead. He is a work dog. It must be about his business. So this is from Cross Creek, and this is a very sad story too. There are happy ones, trust me. But when she came down, she didn't know about work dogs. She just thought, oh, here's a dog in the street. I'm gonna go call it over. So she called the dog over, and dog's looking at her. She goes, come on. So he comes over and she pets him. And then the next day she sees him again. It's like, oh, okay, come on over. Pets him again. He gets a little more friendly. And this goes on and on. Because she really is isolated. She does have her friends, but a lot of times she is alone. Because she wants to write. She doesn't want to be disturbed. So at this point in her life, this is one of her only friends, is this dog in the street. So they get closer. Then she finds out that this is a work dog. You're not supposed to do that. Kind of like a service dog. So she gets another dog. It winds up being Pat, one of her favorite dogs. It's a puppy. So she's training Pat, taking her around, and the dog comes, and those two dogs are having a good time, but she can't train Pat. So what does she do? She tells the dog to get. She goes, go, get. She'd be big and off. And then the next day, she's walking back. She goes, oh, that's it, get out. And that was it, 2 days. This dog's back to work. And so that's what this quote is. The dog said, I'm done with you. He goes back to work. But this kind of broke her heart that she had to do that. It was tough. But there were a lot of work dogs. And you'll notice that dogs play a predominant role in a lot of her writing. The yearling, also, the dogs are there too. Yes, you're shaking your head, yes, but Penny and Jody rely on those dogs, and if everyone remembers the yearling, the fight with Sloofa, involves dogs. And the trade for the gun involved with the foresters, so dogs were very important to her. Let's see.
To the point that Adela writes about her that she's constantly covered in cat and dog fur.
Yes. We see all these glamorous pictures of her, and she's in these nice clothes, and she's going up to New York. Adela says you cannot get the dog and cat hair off of her. Everywhere she goes, she's leaving just hair everywhere. She would buy a new dress, and 5 minutes later, it's covered with pet hair. So, but she was an animal lover. Oh, here we go.
And part of the reason that she was constantly covered in animal fur is that they went with her wherever she goes, which I just thought is such a nice insight into who Marjorie is as a person. So, and not just her dog, she would bring her cat with her. That was my dream, is to bring my cat places, and he did not want to. So I'm so impressed that she was able to get her cats. This is her cat, Jib. She was able to get him to travel with her. And so towards the end of her life, she got a house up in upstate New York, Van Hornsville, and she didn't like to fly. And so Norton would drive her up to New York for the summer so she could write, and he would come back down to work in the hotel. But he would drive her and the dog and the cat and occasionally her maid, and so that they could all be with her while she's up in New York writing. And then the end of the summer, he would drive them back, all of them together. And you can imagine, I mean, it's hard to get a hotel that says, yes, we would love to have you and your dog and your cat. And so there's a story where they finally find a hotel on their way back down from New York that will accept them, but then the dog gets into mud, and then Marjorie's trying to get the dog, so now she's covered in mud, and the hotelier is like, I regret saying that you could stay at this hotel. So luckily Norton was able to smooth things over, but you know, you can just imagine them all coming with her entourage.
Okay. So this next picture is a picture of Marjorie at the trial. Did everyone know that she went to trial? Okay. Some people, yes. This is her friend, Zelma. She always considered her friend, and even though it was a quote. But she also described her friend as an ageless spinster, resembling an angry, inefficient canary.
That's how I describe all my friends.
Yes, right? Facebook. Go ahead.
And I don't know how much people are familiar with Cross Creek. So if you've been to book club, maybe you are. But Cross Creek is kind of it's both her life, right, but also a slightly fictionalized version of her life.
She always maintained that it was a piece of fiction. I know we talked about that in Cross Creek, but today we shelve it in biography. If you're looking for it, it's in biography. But she's always said, this is a piece of fiction. I'm still trying to figure out what the fiction is.
Yeah, and in fact, in her letters with Max Perkins, with her editor, they're going back and forth about, like, what do I include? Like, tell me what I should take out in terms of libel. And he missed this one. Yes. He missed this quote. He was like, it'll be fine. It was not fine.
So in 1943, Zelmer files her complaint. Takes 3 years to go to trial because it goes up to the Florida Supreme Court. Supreme Court says, throws out some of them, except invasion of privacy. She said, you invaded Zelma's privacy, or maybe you did. Let's go have a trial. So 1946 is when they have the trial. You can imagine no one went. No, everyone went. This was a circus. 1946, you had and she's a legitimate star in Cross Creek. Everyone wanted to see this. It was hard to get in to watch this trial. And it lasted a while. You had very good attorneys. This is where Philip S. May comes in, senior. The original trial, kind of funny, it ends in her favor. Basically what they were trying to say is Zelma had a bad mouth. She swore all the time. She refused to say that. So what do? You get people that say, yeah, Zelma had a bad mouth. She did that all the time. Zelma hated that. But she had two of her friends testify, Tom Glisson and Desi Smith. The judge said, what else are the other witnesses going to say? Oh, that she swears. I've heard enough. She swears a lot. I get it. So she won. But Zelma filed an appeal to the Florida Supreme Court. Like, what are you doing? Okay. It goes up. It gets reversed. The Florida Supreme Court says, oh, yeah, you did. Go back to trial and let's figure it out. But you did invade her privacy. This lasted 5 years. Eventually, some of the reporting gets this wrong. Eventually, they settle. Let me see, what year is this? I think it's 1948. 1948, they settle for $1. That was it.
But
Nobody was happy with that.
right, because she was asking for
$100,000.
$100,000, but $1 in 1948 is still $1,050 today. So
No, those were the costs.
those were the costs.
Yeah, dollar's
Yeah.
a dollar. It's still a lot.
Well,
But it came out during trial
oh,
that she was worth, in today's money at that time, about a couple $1 million. That slipped out.
oops.
Yeah, she's like, oh, I shouldn't have said it. Yes, right. But one of the aspects of the trial, again, we're talking about her friends, is that everyone knew she was a writer. Everyone knew they were right, that she was writing about them. Tom Glisson, when he testified, he goes, yeah, I suppose that she wrote the truth, same as she wrote about me. Same with Desi. Desi appeared in a few of her stories. One very famous about a boat trip. We'll get to that in a little bit. But everyone knew that she was a writer. She wasn't really good at plowing the field or picking the oranges. The one thing she was good at, though, drinking, thank you, and writing. So that was part of her defense, was that everyone knew I was a writer, and if you lived in Cross Creek, you were going to get my book. It kind of worked with the jury, but not with the Supreme Court. What's important, though, is, I'll finish on this, is that she always worried about exoticizing her neighbors. She did live with the Cracker family for a while, for a couple months, because she wanted to be able to portray them honestly. And she does write to Max that she's worried about exploitation. And they kind of write back and forth, and she comes to the conclusion that the way that she's doing it is doing it right. And I think if you do read Cross Creek and The Yearling in some of her early stories, that she does get it right. She's not exploiting her neighbors, but she's actually telling an honest story.
Which I think is a really interesting thing to be happening at that time period, right? That she's concerned about, whether or not she's honestly portraying them. She's concerned about whether or not she's using them. Because I think it is really easy to jump to that conclusion. Here comes this woman from outside, moving to this community, and now she's suddenly, she gets a Pulitzer Prize for writing The Yearling, which she would probably, I would argue, not be able to write if she hadn't moved to Cross Creek and gotten to know these people and written about them. And so the fact that she's thinking about these things, I think, is telling, is interesting.
Okay, here we go. This is Desi Smith. Desi Smith Vincent, Desi Smith Prescott. Can barely see it. Oh, okay. She is in an Army uniform. She was in WAC, and Desi was a firecracker. She walked around with a gun in her belt, yes, right? And she was, I believe she was the first female warden or game warden in the state of Florida, and one of the first female pilots in the country. She was not afraid of anything. And when she testified, she says, I swear, and Zelma swears. We both swear. A swearer knows a swearer. She did that. But Desi is important for a lot of things. Not only did she provide Marjorie with a character, but she also helped Charlie and Marjorie that first year at the farm. She helped them diversify. She goes, well, we're just going to grow oranges and sell them. Desi's like, that's not going to work. Because sometimes oranges don't grow. So you need to get chickens and get some cows and milk and become a full farm. Don't just think that you can type and watch the oranges fall and pick them up and sell them. So she was very instrumental that first year. She also taught Marjorie how to shoot. Marjorie did not know how to shoot, and she did not have a good gun. She had a gun that was sawed off and too big, and every time she shot, she would get a headache. She goes, well, give me that gun. She tried shooting, because I can't hit anything either. She's a good shot. So she gave her first really good gun. It was a 22, and I think Marjorie kept it for the rest of her life. Right? 22 is okay? Man,
It's a toy.
it's a toy. This is the woman who threatened me. Yes. You didn't threaten me. That's okay. Yeah, right? But Marjorie would become a good hunter, a good shooter, and that is also in Cross Creek. If you do read Cross Creek, she does talk about shooting, shooting deer, shooting squirrels. There's one point where she was just shooting everything, and Charlie had had a fight, and Charlie goes out to the garage, and Marjorie sees the squirrels that have been stealing her what are they, the dates? Pecans, thank you. And he sees Marjorie out the door waiting for them squirrels, and he doesn't know that. And he's like, I'm gonna stay away for a while. But she does become a good shot. Eventually she does right that she's gonna give up her guns, and then we'll talk about that later. She does kind of stop hunting, but she used to hunt from a car. So hunting was important. We'll get into hunting a little bit more, but it was important in the Creek. It wasn't just a sport. If you read Jacob's Ladder, they had a hunting season, but the hunting season was for the rich folks that came down and they hunted. There was another hunting season. It was illegal, but that was for folks who needed to eat. So subsistence hunting was important in this region for a very long time. And we're talking into the 30s and 40s too. Again, this area is isolated. There's no highway system, right? Right. But eventually, Desi does become one of the main characters in Hyacinth Drift, which is a wonderful story. It's the second to last chapter in Cross Creek, but it was also published as a story in a magazine too. Desi was a good outdoors person. Marjorie wasn't. They got lost, mostly because Marjorie's not great at this time. Hyacinth Drift comes from the way that Marjorie would try and navigate the river. She goes, oh, they're floating down the river, and that's where the water's going, so that's where we need to go, Desi. Desi goes, no, I just do some trash out, and see where the trash is going? That's the current. We need to follow that. She goes, oh, okay. The wind's blowing the other way. She goes, oh, okay. So Desi was a wonderful person. She knew everything about nature, and she really did help Marjorie understand the natural aspects of Cross Creek that first year. Let's see, next. The third is going to be the community. Okay, here we go. This is Adela Parker and Martha Mickens. These were Marjorie's not only two maids. Marjorie had a lot of maids, but Adela was often referred to, and if you read Cross Creek, often referred to as the perfect maid, I believe, in the correspondence.
Yes, when she would write, she rarely used the names of her different maids, other than Martha, but a lot of times she would talk about her maids, and when she finally found Adela, she wrote Julia, I found my perfect maid, she suits me perfectly.
And Adela would often visit, years ago until she passed away, she would often visit the farm and visit people and talk about her time with Marjorie. She did write a book, and she was very respectful of Marjorie. They were more than, maid and person. They became very close friends, but Adela does admit that, I'm going to read a quote, that Marjorie was very hard to get along with and impossible to reason with at times. Because she was very strong-willed. If she wanted to do something, she would do it. She's about yay high, 5'7", 180 pounds, strong. She had icy blue, gray eyes, and she was a force to be reckoned with. At Cross Creek, there's a quote where Adela's saying that everybody wanted to be boss. And she will refer to Boss Bryce. I'm saying Marjorie would refer to Boss Bryce, but she wanted to be boss. So there was this competition of who would be boss, who would be in charge. And that led to some friction, but again, Marjorie walking around with a cigarette and a gun was something that you didn't want to get, getting on the wrong side of. Adela knew her limits, how she could talk to Marjorie, but they would talk openly as friends. But Adela was also confounded by Marjorie. Again, going back to those contradictions. When Marjorie brings Adela to the farm, she goes, "Here it is, what do you think?" And she sees this wonderful white house. She goes, "Oh my God, this is beautiful." She goes, "Martha, would you take Adela to her room?" She takes her to the tenant house, and her room is separated from Martha's by a curtain. And she has an army cot to sleep on. And she was like, "I can't believe it. This woman doesn't care." And she was almost going to leave that first night. She eventually does leave. She leaves 3 times, but she couldn't leave. She left because she couldn't help her anymore. Towards the end of Marjorie's life, she was drinking a lot, and she would lean, because of the isolation, she would lean on Adela so much that Adela just couldn't take it anymore. I can't be responsible for you. Now, Adela does live a very long life. She died at 101 in 2015. Yes. She had some good genes, and she does say that in her book. She goes, "I think I'm going to be around for a little longer." But what's interesting about both Adela and Martha is when Marjorie is talking about race and race relations, she's talking local. She's always talking, whether it's in Jacob's Ladder, not in Yearling, but in Cross Creek, she's talking about race in relation to her labor needs, her needs on the farm. And then Martha Mickens, old Martha and Will, that was an older married couple. Martha was kind of the rock. She never went anywhere. She understood Marjorie, and she just would get out of her way. Marjorie hated Will, but she didn't want to get rid of him because if Will left, then he'd take Martha. And Martha called everyone sugar. Martha had a daughter named Adrena, and that was one of Marjorie's first maids. Now, Adrena was young, good looking, and she said, "You need a groomsman, I need a husband, I'm going to solve both our problems." So she tried and she tried. It's fair to say that she had 4 or 5 groomsmen. None of them worked out for either one. And then Adrena eventually left, and that's where Adela comes in a little later. She's had some other maids. If you read Cross Creek, Geechee is one of her favorites. What's interesting about that is that Geechee succumbs to alcoholism. That's why she has to live, but Marjorie does not see this in front of her happening. She does not see what's happening to her. The same thing's happened to Geechee. So let's see. Yes. So I know we've been talking about, I think this is interesting. Thank you for reminding me. When you read Cross Creek, when you read Jacob's Ladder, when you read her short stories, it's disturbing the way that she uses language and the way that she talks about African Americans in a demeaning way. It's difficult, but Marjorie was progressive. her views did change over time. One of the things I did want to read, and this is from Roger Tarr. Roger Tarr's introduction to her short stories is, she wrote a letter mid-40s now. Remember, this is mid-40s in America, to the editorial writer for the Florida Times-Union in Jacksonville. She's expecting this letter to get published, and the editor up there was a segregationist. He was a separatist, and he was, a racist. So she writes the letter. I myself began with an acceptance of segregation. I took it for granted, coming from a preponderantly Southern ancestry. I can only tell you that when long soul searching and a combination of circumstances delivered me of my last prejudices, there was an exalted sense of liberation. It was not the Negro who became free, but I. I wish and pray for your own liberation. It is almost a religious experience. No man is free as long as another is enslaved. And she expected that to be published. Segregation for Marjorie back across Creek got in her way. When she wanted to go to the movies and take Adela, she would take Adela to the movies. And they would stop her and they go, you can't take her in. There's one time where she goes in, assuming Adela's behind her, she goes into the movies and she's like, Adela's like, I can't go in. She goes, I have her car keys. Will you give her the car keys? These are to the two white men stopping her. I go, no. She comes out. She grabs Adela. She goes, we're going to watch this movie. She goes, you two better get out of my way. She took her in. Adela has no idea what movie they saw. She thought they were going to get murdered, or that she was going to get murdered. But no one was going to cross Marjorie. The same thing happened when they were driving Norman and the cat and the dog and Adela, and they needed to stop, and they were going to just stop and eat at a restaurant. See, Marjorie's not thinking about the South. They're in Georgia because they're going up to New York, going up to the house. They all pile out, dog, cat, everyone. And Adela's like, here we go again. They go in, and they're like, she can't come in there. She goes, what? And she starts a commotion. She leaves. Norman's like, I gotta go to the bathroom. There's a tree down there. And so she just wouldn't put up with it. Segregate, it really did bother her. And it's confusing to us today that the way that she wrote about the black community across Creek is far different than her actions, especially later in life. But I wanted to bring that up because I know that a lot of times when we read this, we're confused by what she says in Cross Creek. Again, that's, the day. My thing turned off. I know, right? It's always technology. Okay, this is another quote. We at the Creek need and have found only very simple things. We must need the flowering and fruiting trees, for all of us have citrus groves of one size or another. We must need a certain blandness of season, with a longer and more beneficent heat than many require, for there is never too much sun for us, and through the long summers we do not complain. That's a lie. They all complain. They all do. You read that book, they all complain. We need the song of birds, and there is none finer than the red bird. We need the sound of raining coming across the hammock, and the sound of wind in trees, and there is no more sensitive aeolian harp than the palm.
So what I love about this and what I love about Marjorie's writing about Central Florida is how she idealizes it, right? It's this idyllic place. You read this and you think, I love being in Florida. And then you step outside to go to your car after this and you're going to think, was that the Florida Marjorie was in? In fact, it was without AC. And so she has this way of writing about it. And I do believe she believed it, because even when she's writing her friends, she's writing about it and like, come stay with me at the farm. It'll be wonderful. She's having her friends from the north stay with her in the middle of summer. She doesn't say, come stay with me in December when it's reasonable and you'll be okay. She's like, no, come stay with me in July. You'll love it. I'll be doing some writing so you can get some reading done. So she writes about it in this way where it just is this place of perfection, really.
One of the things that we were talking about when we were trying to figure this part out is that it's an idyllic picture with a prosaic reality. That's Ashley's quote, so quoting her. Alachua County at the time had open fields. Does anyone know what that means in farming? It means if I had a hog, your hog could go anywhere, right, Angela? Yeah.
You have a husband?
Yeah, well, too, right? But she would often wake up and there's hogs under, eating her flowers, eating her, other cows. And everyone's trying to figure out whose cows this, whose goat's that. And that's how it was. It was difficult. And you could put up a fence to try and keep people out, but it didn't work. The fences get knocked over. And if anyone's read Jacob's Ladder, anyone here read that? That is her first short story that really captured the essence of Cross Creek. Jacob's Ladder is a story about Flory and Mart, and as they make their way across Florida on foot, often without shoes. It is a painful story to read. It's dealing with Florida nature, but it's also a beautiful story because these two people who should be dead don't die because of their relation to nature, and they know how to live off the land. This also comes up in the Yearling, if you've read the Yearling, about how beautiful the land is. It's also very dangerous. I mean, we have snakes and bears and so forth. But this picture that she's creating here is far more idyllic, bucolic.
But also I feel like she's also aware of that because at one point she writes in a letter like, Norton was at the beach house and there was a hurricane, and whereas, here we live through hurricanes, you would think she'd be like, I'm so glad I wasn't there during the hurricane. She writes, I'm so mad I wasn't there during the hurricane. I love being in a hurricane and just nature roaring all around me. And so there is this sense of even the things that, other people might say, that's dangerous in nature, don't do that. She views it in this idyllic way, like this is great. How wonderful to be in a space where the wind and the waves are crashing all around you.
And there's 2 hurricanes, not one. You get 2 in Jacob's Ladder, beginning and the end. So it's not that she was dishonest in her writing, but it did paint a picture that was quite different from life at Cross Creek. Let's see, we're going to go to the next slide. And I think this is one of her more famous quotes from the book. This is the last chapter, and it's almost the last paragraph. I thought of countless generations that had owned the land. Of what did that ownership consist? I thought of the great earth whirling in space. It was here ahead of men and could conceivably be here after them. How should one man say that he owned any piece of or parcel of it? If he worked with it, labored to bring it to fruition, it seemed to me that at most he held it in fief. So place and space was very important, but so was land and land conservation. This begins in Jacob's Ladder, and there's a revision of it in the Yearling. I don't want to get too complicated, but it is this myth of the pioneer. When you read Jacob's Ladder and you read the Yearling, especially with Penny, they're going to capture, this piece of land, work it, and it's going to be theirs. It's the garden metaphor, right? If I wasn't gardening and if I wasn't keeping the bushes away, this place would be a jungle. It would be terrible. Well, that's nature, right? But she perpetuates this myth that goes back to American history, right? That the Western, go west, of the pioneer. So she is in that same category. She perpetuates that, but she does change. She does change her outlook. Again, I told you the story about the seasons and hunting, but for Marjorie, nature and labor were always tied. except that last sentence. And this is the biggest change in her life, and this is the biggest change in her writing. And basically what she's saying, it doesn't matter if you work it. It's not yours, you don't own it. And this is a fundamental change. It's a change from the yearling, and it's a change from Jacob's ladder. You remember Jacob's ladder? Mark just wanted to work the land. That's all he wanted to do. The same with Penny and Jody. They felt that because they worked the land, they were, it owed them something. So I guess one of the questions is, to you, is this transcendentalism?
So what it reminded me of transcendentalism. So if that's something that you haven't heard in a hot minute, so transcendentalism is coming out of Boston, the Boston area, and like the early mid 1800s. So Emerson and Thoreau and the Alcotts. And if you're thinking that name sounds familiar, if you know Little Women, Louisa May Alcott, her father was a transcendentalist. I'm seeing some nods. Excellent. Welcome to Girls Literature. And so her father came up with this idea that reminded me a little bit of Marjorie's life on her farm. So Bronson, it's like, we're all going to do, we're all going to move to a farm, and we're going to have a commune there. And what I'm going to do on this farm called Fruitlands is I'm going to think big thoughts with the other people living here. We're going to think big thoughts together, which sounds great. And it reminds me of Marjorie and Charlie being like, we're going to move to Florida and we're going to have a farm and we're going to write great things. Big thoughts in our writing. But the reality is, who is running the farm? Well, what does Bronson do? He says, my wife and children will run the farm. You can imagine they did not live on that farm for long. But it is sort of this thing, and I think, one of the things about, she wanted to have a maid because she said, well, I need to write for 8 hours. She's writing correspondence, she's writing other things, and she can't do that unless someone else is cooking for her, unless someone else is cleaning for her. And Norton wasn't doing that, he was at the hotel. So she needed to have this additional help, and we know that she had people helping with the farm. We know that she had people who were, yes, that doesn't mean that she wasn't doing some of the work or wasn't capable of doing some of the work, but she had people that she was able to pay. The Alcotts didn't, because they didn't have money. But they, so there is this sense of she's living in harmony with nature, in part because she's able to have people help her live in harmony with nature.
And the reason why this, I think, is an interesting question is because she's thought of as one of the Marjories, right? We have Marjorie Carr, we have Marjorie Stone Douglas, right? And we have Marjorie Rawlings. The three Marjories. We know the other two were environmentalists, right? Across Florida Canal, Marjorie Carr helped stop that. She created the organization, she took on the Nixon administration and kept Florida from becoming, or South Florida from becoming an island, right? It was almost an island, straight through. And we know Marjorie Stone Douglas, River of Grass, and she also wrote Florida Boy. She did write this,
I don't know what it's really called. I think the story is Florida Boy.
Yes, but she did write about, children in Florida and living in nature. Again, it's the theme of this River of Grass. So where does Marjorie land? I don't know. It's an interesting question, and people today are still trying to figure it out. Early Marjorie, no. Again, driving in her Buick and shooting and hunting. I don't think Marjorie Carr would do that. But, this last paragraph, whirling in space, who says that in the 40s? And then holding land, not only temporary. So this is, I guess, her evolution. And so I don't know. I think she belongs.
I think whether intentionally or unintentionally, the interesting thing is that her farm is now a state park. So whether or not, I think her legacy in many ways is preserving old Florida, but also the fact that the land that she, whether owned or didn't, depending on her mindset, is now available to everyone because of the state park. And so I think that's part of her legacy as well.
Okay, here's our last section. Cookery. Yes, yes. Oh, we got some fans here. Substance trapping, gathering, hunting, farming. I love this picture. This is one of my favorite pictures of Marjorie. Can you see that? She's crabbing. She's got this thing. She's just picking up this crab, and she's gonna wear that dress all day. Yeah, she's like, I gotta get a crab. I got people coming over tonight, so I'm just gonna go out in the boat. Actually, what's interesting about this picture is a series of pictures a photographer came down from Saturday Evening Post to see how Marjorie cooks. And there's gator tail, there's crabs, there's frogs, there's frog legs, a lot of interesting food, good food. And she knew how to cook. That poor gentleman, we don't know who he is. I think he's holding the boat. He's part of the crew.
But what you
Yes.
can't quite see, because maybe you can, is that her hair is like it's just kind of just barely tamed. And here she is, she's like, yeah, I'm gonna be in this magazine. Saturday Evening Post. Don't worry about it, I got a crowd.
Right. She didn't care how she looked, and that's what Adela always said. She had the money. She would buy new clothes. She never combed her hair. Cat hair, dog hair. I don't know if you can see that on that. I love this. Let's see. Cookery is my one vanity, and I am a slave to any guest who praises my culinary art. This is my Achilles heel. For my part, my literary ability may be safely questioned as harshly as one wills, but indifference to my table puts me in a rage. Adela talks about cooking with Marjorie, and she says those were some of the happiest days of my life. When they were trying to make this book, Cross Creek Cookery, they cooked everything. They just didn't grab recipes and just put them in a book. They wanted to make sure that all the ingredients were right and that it tasted well. Adele's like, well, I usually just put a pinch here and put a pinch there, and she's like, no. So they would try a pinch or 2 pinches. She wanted it exact and perfect. That's not how Adela cooked. But they were always baking. That was another thing Adela said. She goes, yeah, she wanted to make this book, but you don't understand. Middle of summer, it's 100 degrees out, and she's cooking all the time. It was miserable. She couldn't wait for this book to be done. Another thing about Adela, she says that Marjorie rarely smiled, and I could see that. If you look at any of her pictures, she's not smiling at all. She only smiled when she was cooking, and that was one of the things that Adela loved about her. Cross Creek Cookery is an interesting book. She gave Adela, I think, credit for 2 recipes. Most of them are Adela's. She said that all I got was an autographed copy. Gets worse. In those days, I was grateful any crumb that white people might let fall. So Cross Creek Cookery is a good book. It's I would say it's both of their, Marjorie and Adela. She helped Marjorie work that book out. But it is interesting. We have one down here. We have one over there if you want to check it out. Kathy, I think. You went through, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
There was one part where they talk about how one of the recipes, they tried to recreate as much as they could, but the roaches hadn't had the recipe.
Living on the farm.
Yeah.
Here we go. But she did love it. Let's see. Here's another one. Oh, boy. Let's see.
There's so much.
Yeah, so much more than this. Let's see. I did. I missed one. Oh, look at that. Better Men Than I have written lyrically about the mango. There's mangoes there too. They've also written to my notion abusively, for they insist that the only way to eat a mango is in a bathing suit by the side of the ocean or in a bathtub. This maligns the mango. She had opinions. But more than the mango, oranges, and everything that she grew on the farm, they were very important. And she relied on her income very early on. When Adela got there, she said she was kind of poor stepping to rich. But she needed that farm. She had a grove. that was producing some fruit, but I don't know, title and property was kind of iffy, so she just went across the street, and if you see that map, the East Grove, she just started planting more trees. I don't know if that was her land. Might not have been, but she needed the trees. But for her and for everyone in the creek, you know, the oranges were very important. They're all gone now. We know that. But it helped shape her and helped shape Cross Creek. Here we go. Here's the quote. I love this. Hello, Mo. We're in complete agreement on squirrel meat. Fried, smothered fried with rich gravy or made into pilau. What is it? Say it again. I'm sorry. What is it?
Well, they really pronounce it as, there's an R in there.
Pilar?
Perlu.
Perlu. Thank you. I'm just a Yankee.
Perlu.
Yes, we esteem it highly.
It's delicious.
Thank you. There are, however, strong differences of opinion on the edibility of the head. Cora's leaving. It's made him sick. I know, sorry. No, that's true. If you read Cracker Chitlings, there is a fight about whether whether you should put the squirrel head in the stew. Just so you know, you can tell it's a Georgia cracker, head in the stew. Florida cracker, no head in the stew.
In case you were worried about, you know, in case that's something that you come across.
Yes, if you have friends coming over. Now she did again, like for Saturday Evening Post, she did, you know, a lot of this was performative. But if you go to this grove, this is how you live, this is how you eat. Jacob's Ladder again is all about people living off the land. When we say living off the land, we're talking about I didn't eat in December, but the only reason why I'm here is because I ate a coot, which is a turtle, some coons and so forth. But they would hunt and eat what they shot, and scrub food was reality. And talk about Jacob's Ladder. So, yeah, that's a good quote. There's a good recipe in the cookbook if you want for a squirrel. Here we go.
We're not sure. We're not sure of the hunting laws though, so
Yeah.
this is,
No,
consult your own lawyer.
yeah, no squirrel back there. I associate soup with either poverty or formal elegance. The poor make a meal of it, the elegant dabble in it, beginning a long dinner of many courses with a cup or a plate of it. Aggravatingly small if the soup be good, but in any case filling up a precious portion of the stomach that might be better left vacant. To my notion, for more intriguing dishes, she did not want soup. She didn't like soup. That was a waste of time.
And so what I love about this quote is it really in some ways speaks to Marjorie as this, having this transient nature, right? Here she is, she's living amongst the Cracker community in Cross Creek. She's getting along with them. She understands about eating squirrel, which I imagine is not something she grew up eating up in DC in Maryland. And yet she also is able to go back to these spaces, right? She goes up to New York City and meets with her editor, and she stays at the Scribner's mansion, and she's able to be in these spaces and places, and she's also able to be accepted by the Cracker community. And so I think it's really, she's an interesting person for that reason, to be able to fit in, to know how to fit in with both.
Yeah, so she would cross over, but there's also, I think, evidence that when she was in one, she missed the other. So, you know, when she went to St. Augustine, she missed Cross Creek. And then when she was in Cross Creek, she just had to get to the beach. Famous people would come to Cross Creek to eat, and they eat her food, and they'd be dining on venison and crab and gator tail steaks. And we're talking about very famous people. Cross Creek was basically her show, and she made good on that. famous politicians from Florida. That's why she did so well in this trial, folks. She wasn't going to lose at trial. Politicians, senators would come and dine with her. But she would be restless if she was away from the creek. And we'll just end it at this here, because cooking was her passion. It probably, a lot of people say it probably led to her early death, because she ate a lot of rich food. She gained a lot of weight, I think, because of it, and because of her drinking. But I guess that's it. I think that's, I want to say thank you, but we're going to just talk about two more things here.
Yeah. You want to say?
Yes, I want to say we've had a full month, a fun month. This is Marjorie's 129th birthday, right? Very important. Never forget you want to. We'll see what happens next year, but we've had a lot so far. We've had book clubs, we've had Let Us Cook, we've had DIY, we've had this one. We have one more. In 2 weeks, we're going to have Celebrating Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings through music, poetry, and prose. We're going to have Kathy Celestri. She's a local author who's done good. And Shanna Smith. Anyone know Shanna? Shanna Banana? Yeah, Shanna Banana. They are going to come and sing and give us a little poetry with original songs and poetry devoted to Marjorie. So please, it's on the 30th from 1 to 3 p.m. We'll have more food there, so please come for the food. Yes?
And then
And stay for the music.
And then
Taking orders now.
And then I would be remiss if I didn't invite you to join our society. And so Peter and I both are trustees in the Marjorie Kinnan Rawlings Society, and I think I know several of you are also. So raise your hand if you're part of the society.
There we go.
Excellent representation.
Yes, yes.
Anyone here part of the farm as well, Friends of the Farm?
I've donated.
Excellent.
Mm-hmm.
That counts. So we want to invite you to join. So obviously we've got the QR code here, but we also have them on the flyers. It's not just for people who are in academics. It's for people who love Marjorie. It's for people who love books. It's for people who love this old way of life in Florida and want to celebrate it. Joining the society, we have a conference once a year. We go to different places in the state. This upcoming year is going to be in DeLand, and I hear there's an amazing auction that's going to be happening.
You gonna go to Pasadena?
Maybe.
If you're good.
You get to you get a newsletter, you get access to the journal, but what I have loved is the friendships that I have made, and that's gonna sound so cheesy, but I do genuinely mean it. The society is filled with just the most wonderful people. So if you are thinking, I might be interested, it's $30 for an individual, and in this economy, $30 seems a pretty good deal.
You have something about accessible.
Oh yeah.
Many avenues in.
Yeah. Well, that's what I was saying.
Yes, right.
You love it.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't have to know everything. You can appreciate it and become a member of the society. You don't have to have knowledge. You don't have to be an expert or anything. You could just come because you loved reading the yearling. We have a lot of people. Angela, I think you drew a picture, right? Yes. Yes. If you've drawn a picture, please, you can join.
Yeah. There is no quiz.
There's no quiz. You don't have to
like,
know.
have you read every one of her books? Then you can join. Or
Right.
yeah.
Yeah.
You don't. And now you all know how to pronounce her middle name, so you're basically
Halfway there.
society members.
Yes.
So come on down.
That's it. Yes. So if you have any questions, just ask us about society. If you have any questions now, I know we've run. Let's see. It is about 2:20. Does anyone have any questions about anything? Anything else? Yeah? Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming. Thank you. Thank you to Dr. Ashley Reese. Yeah.